Welcome to the live stream. Hopefully everybody can hear me, but I'm not on yet. Welcome to the live stream, guys. Full system build today. This is a customer build. This is an Intel build. This is a 12th generation build. If you're interested in any of these parts, all the links are in the description, so you'll be able to see them, and you can click on the links and get all the model numbers and etc. All of the links down below are from Micro Center, so if you have a Micro Center near you, you can purchase it there. If you don't, you can go to Newegg or something like that. I don't recommend purchasing these items on Amazon because Amazon does not give you exact model number lookup, and it becomes a little bit of a problem. So buy at your own risk. All right, let me flip over to the top screen, which is not on, of course, because I am never prepared. There we go. Okay, let's get this in focus. I'm going to switch it up to camera 2. Okay. Be in the corner there. All right, hopefully everybody can hear me. Hopefully the sound is good. I really didn't have time to do a sound check, so I'm hoping it's okay. If there's a problem, let me know. All right, so what you're going to need, first off, is you're going to need some tools. So you're going to need a screwdriver, a pair of cutters, a knife, and a USB flash drive for loading Windows, etc. You'll also need some wire ties if you want to do cable management. These are kind of optional, but in my opinion, they're required. Okay, what we're building today, very simply, we have an Intel i5. This is a 12th gen. This is an i5 12400. This is an LGA 1700 socket. If you go 13th gen, it's the same socket, so you can replace it with whatever. You may need a motherboard BIOS upgrade before you do that. So this is a little slanted, aren't we? All right, let's turn a little bit. There we go. There we go. So it's a little less slanted. Okay, so motherboard we're using is an MSI Motherboard Pro H610M-G DDR4. There is DDR5 available. We have not been using it, and there's a few reasons why. Basically, the DDR5 that we have been testing has been kind of hit or miss with Intel, and until they could fix all that stuff in their BIOS and some other issues, we are going to avoid it. We want with something a little more stable. So this is we're putting an NVMe in. We're going to put a 500 gigabyte Crucial. RAM is 16 gigabytes, DDR4, 3200 megahertz memory. And for the power supply is a Thermaltake Smart 500W. For the case itself, it is a Thermaltake H17. It's kind of the one we normally build in. It's just a nice case. It's less expensive than most, and it has a lot of features. So we're going to start with building out with the motherboard, and we're going to open up all the packaging. We always start with the motherboard first. Fold the knife for safety. Motherboard out. That's the motherboard itself. We also have a few little accessories. It always comes with accessories. SATA cables. We're not going to use these because we don't have a SATA drive, but keep them on the side. I/O shield. The pain in the butt I/O shield. Right over there. Some sort of little logo from MSI and some other garbage that we really don't need. A manual, which we're not going to use. And then this is for your M.2 NVMe drive, which we're going to need. So we're going to put this off to the side carefully so we don't lose that. But everything else is pretty much garbage. We don't use the CD that comes with it. We get the drivers from online because online has a much better, newer drivers available. So we'll go with that. All right, motherboard. Just going to pop out the motherboard here. Sorry about all the crinkling. Okay. I think one of these days I'm actually going to take everything out instead of all this crinkling bags. All right, so the motherboard itself, what to really go over here, you got your RAM sockets, your regular CPU socket, your M.2 socket for your hard drive. We don't have a graphic card, but if you had a graphic card, it would be placed in this socket here. This motherboard actually has a little metal reinforcement, I guess just for the longer graphic cards to prevent the card from sagging. or getting damaging the port. This board does have a decent amount of fan controller, fan power. It does have one here. It is missing one for the back fan, like usual. So we'll just ignore that. But there is one here for at least one case fan, which is all we're going to really use for this machine. We're not going to have multiple fans at this point. And there's no reason to, because this machine is 12th gen, so it's not that hot. It doesn't really get that warm, so we really don't need something crazy. Plus, it doesn't have a graphic card or anything. We're doing all onboard video, so. Going to open up the socket. To open up the socket, you just basically, if you noticed, I just basically pulled the arm up from this side and then flipped open the socket. Be careful of the pins. The pins are on the motherboard, so do not touch that socket with your bare hands. You should be only putting the processor in that socket. I'm going to open up the processor box. This processor happens to come with a cooler already, but if you don't have a cooler, you can purchase one. If you want a more advanced cooler, you can also do that. In the side, that's your processor, and then this is your fan. I'm not going to take the fan out right now because obviously I want to put the processor in first. When handling the processor, just be very careful not to touch the underside of the processor because it does have pins on the bottom. So try not to touch that side. This is the top. There is a little arrow in the left corner here of the processor. That arrow should coincide with the arrow on the motherboard, which in this case is over here on this side. So you're going to line up the arrows. The arrows are going to match each other, and you're going to just drop it right in the socket. That's it. Now you can put it down and you're going to close it up, and the top piece is going to pop off. That's the cover. You can keep this if you're going to sell your motherboard at any point in time. You want to keep that. If you're not going to sell your motherboard or anything separate, then you can just toss this at this point. Or if you need to do an RMA for your motherboard, you may want to hold on to that just in case you got to send it back, because they're going to require that. Now let's take out the CPU fan. Heatsink fan. This is the one that comes with Intel. This is, it's an okay one. We're not overclocking or anything, so there's really no reason to have a custom cooler for this. This is also a business computer, so there's really no need to worry about really heat, or even if it's running 24/7, this fan is fine enough for that. It already comes with pre-applied thermal paste, which is this little gray stuff here. You do not want to touch that, just leave it. If you smudge it, then you're going to have to wipe it all off and then put your own thermal paste on. So that's a real big pain in the butt, so try not to do that. At this point, you're just going to line up the 4 little plastic clips, and you're going to line them up with the holes here, and you're just going to drop that fan into the holes. Just wiggle it a little bit. Now what you're going to do is you're going to go opposite side corners. So you're going to go catty corner. You're just going to plug in one side, plug in the other side. Same thing here. Just so it's even. And then you're going to plug in the CPU fan itself into the CPU fan header, which is up here. It's also labeled on the board. I'm not guessing I'm literally able to see that label. It's a little hard to see on camera, but it does say CPU fan 1. If your motherboard doesn't have it labeled, then check the manual, because the manual will tell you what it is. And then therefore you'll just plug it into the right header. Be sure to always plug it in the correct header, because some boards do check to see if your CPU fan is running correctly, and or maybe have a sensor to double check to make sure that that sensor is working with that temperature. So we're going to now put the RAM in. RAM is just basically DDR4 3200. We've done it before. Let's just take this out. It's kind of our go-to kit at this point for this. Is this Corsair memory. Corsair also puts this stupid little plastic label thing on here. Be sure to take this off before you install the RAM. It is something that a lot of people overlook, and then they have a piece of plastic flying around their case when it gets hot, and that's never a good thing. The RAM itself has a notch in the middle. You want to line up that notch with the notch that's on the RAM socket itself. You want to make sure you got the right direction. And make sure that notch lines up correctly before you give it a good full push down. And when you push it down, you should hear a little click and you're good to go. Now, if you push it down and you don't hear that click, then you probably got it the wrong direction. Check the notch and then flip the RAM around the proper way and then install it. Same thing again, you're just going to repeat. You're going to take the little plastic piece off and you're going to slide them into the RAM socket. Give it a little push. It should be a little bit of a push. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to give a lot of force. It should just slide in. If you're giving a lot of force and it's not going in, check the notch, flip it around again. You should be okay to go. All right, now we're going to install the NVMe drive because this is a little hard to get to if we are in the case already. So we're just going to open this up. Come on. Okay. Now, it comes with a little screw, but in this case, it doesn't even have a standoff. That's what this was when we took it out of the motherboard. There's a little standoff and I think there's a little screw in here. So I'm gonna open this up carefully. Do not lose the screw. Ow, it's not even a screw. Okay. It's a stand with a little, like a little latch. I don't know if we can get a look at that. There we go. So it's a screw with a little latch that latches down the drive. So this stand goes into the board and then that M.2 goes over that. I'm going to show that in a second. Let me bring it back. Let's go over here. What you're going to do is you're going to line it up to the one that you have. In this case, it's a 2280, so it's going to be the further one. But some boards have another one that's a little further out, that's a bigger one. You don't want to use that. Just if you're not sure, you can take the drive itself. This board is actually not labeled. It says 2280, but most boards are labeled that have, like, you know, the smaller one, bigger one, whatever. You can line this up and figure out which standoff it goes into before you put it in. I'm not going to put this in right now. I'm going to put the standoff in. I will need a screwdriver that is very small. So I'm going to bring out my little iFixit kit with little small screwdrivers. And let's put this in. And of course it doesn't want to stay. So we're going to have a little bit of a, actually I might be able to do it by hand. Get started by hand. There we go. This is a little bit of a delicate process, which is I'm using the wrong size. Always be sure to use the right size bit before you start. And also make sure to back thread it because I just screwed up. Yeah, it was a little off. Okay, not very happy with this type of installation for this one, but all right. I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes it just don't want to work with me. Come on. There we go. Okay, give it a little screw in. It should just, yep, that's as tight as it goes. Okay, I was over tightening it. All right, so after that's in there, now you can put in your M.2, which I almost just slapped into. There we go. Just basically put almost like a 45 and then just push it in and then push this down and then let the little clip go over it. And that's it. You let go and it should stay. That's all it takes to stay in there. Now there's an extra little screw that it comes with. You can hold on to that, I guess, or toss it if you don't need it. All right. This board also has an optional Wi-Fi unit. The customer does not need Wi-Fi, but if they did need Wi-Fi, you can order that part, and you don't have to have a, you won't have to buy a Wi-Fi adapter. It'll just be a little mini card that you can throw into here. It should come with antenna connectors also to connect down to the board somewhere. I recommend that you get something more external if you're going to use Wi-Fi, just because the system is already metal and it's kind of hard for the Wi-Fi signal to come out of the system. But, you know, if you just need something simple with Wi-Fi, that would probably be the best way to go. All right. That's it for the motherboard. Motherboard's pretty simple. You're just basically putting all the components on, and now we're going to start putting everything into the case. So what I'm touching the power supply like it's the case. That's the power supply. We're going to put the power supply in the case as well. Let's get all the garbage off here. Just clean up really quickly. Just spend 5 seconds and just get everything out of the way. All right, we're going to move this off to the side. I'm going to get the case up here. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to have to take the side panels off. I did not do that yet. So it will look a little blurry. Come on. All right. Just take the screws. When it's installed from the factory, they use thumb screws, but they use an electric screwdriver to screw them in. So they're not really thumb screws anymore. All right, so let's take off the side panels. We're going to also put this down on this side. And this side has the all of the cabling and the wires and the screws. So we're going to just take this off first before we go around to the other side. Just get this out. And we're just going to take this off of here. That's garbage. And this basically has some wire ties, which you could use for your system if you don't have them. They give you a few. And Thermaltake also gives you a whole bunch of other stuff here. So let's take a look. Plastic. All right. So it comes with a little speaker for the motherboard. If you're running into diagnostic problems, then you'll want to attach this to the board. I don't attach these because they're really annoying, because the system then beeps every time the system turns on, or reboots and then it beeps again. It's just a rather annoying thing. So I'm going to leave it off to the side. You connect it if you want, but it will connect to the board, and it'll connect to the motherboard on the speaker header on the motherboard. When you go to do the front panel connectors, I'll show you where that is. Now, this is 2.5-inch SSD screws. We don't have a 2.5-inch drive, so that's going to go right back into the plastic here. We're going to put that in the bottom of the case when we're done, just so we have them. This is for 3.5-inch hard drive. Not using that either, so I'll put that off to the side. And then there's the regular screws. These are the regular screws for the motherboard. Any case fans you may have, little standoffs, and little small screws for the motherboard itself, or any type of peripheral device you're plugging in. I'm going to, I'm just gonna dump them out. If you have a tray for your, for your screws, it's probably best to do that. I am not that organized here today, so I'm just gonna put it on the table. Probably not a good idea. But if you're okay and reasonable enough and not making a big mess, you should be okay with it. Just putting them on the table. I'm off to the side here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Anyway, these cables for now, we're just going to tuck these down here. Just for now. We're not going to do the power supply yet. I'm going to do the motherboard first because I like to do the motherboard first. So let's push this back over. Okay. All right. Get that out of the way. All right, so, all straight, there we go. So at this point, what we have to do is we're gonna have to put the motherboard here. This is the back part of the case. On this side is the back part of the case. This is the front side of the case. On the back side of the case, you're also going to put the I/O shield. This is always something I forget, so I'm gonna do it right now because I always forget about it, and this is part of, if you forget this, you're going to have to start over. So that's why I always dread forgetting when I forget to put one of these in. Now, the I/O shield itself is a little piece of tin metal here. It kind of just tells you what the ports are. Your motherboard's going to slide into this. Now, they have these little stupid clips. Just push them up and out of the way. Be careful, this is a sharp piece of metal. So if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't feel like if you can't be safe here by using your finger, use a pair of pliers very gently and just pull these back a little bit so they're further up. So when you go to put your motherboard in, this will be a little easier to get those in there. So it's going to orient this, basically what you're going to do is your ports are going to be towards the bottom part of the case. So this is going to go down to the bottom side panel. So That's how it basically goes in, flips down, and that goes into this side over here. I'm just gonna pop this in. There's really no way to get a really good camera angle on this, but it's just a piece of metal that pops into the only square that it fits into. So you should have no problem with getting it in there. It should pop all the way in, and it should be flat to the side of the back of the case. Now this has a little fan connector. I'm just going to push this out of the way for now, just so I can see the motherboard area. Now we're going to see the screw layout. These are all the little standoffs. These standoffs hold the motherboard up from the metal part of the case. They are very important. You want to make sure that you have them in the correct spots. Now they do have some labeling on here, which they have added now. It says mini ITX and micro ATX. Micro ATX is number 2 and mini ITX is number 1. Some of these are both 1 and 2, but you'll see that this one down here usually is the one that's usually incorrect. So we're just going to double check, and we're just going to line these up, which in this case, it's actually correct. So what you're going to do is you're going to count up the little screw holes around your motherboard, and then you're going to count up the standoffs that you have and make sure that they both match. In this case, they both match. It's already set up for it. So you're just going to take the motherboard and slide it in place. I am grabbing it from the CPU fan because the CPU fan is able to handle a little bit of weight. So it's fine. Make sure that you are under all the clips for the back of the I/O shield, and then slide in place. Now it should line up, and you should be able to see the motherboard screw standoffs, and they are all there. And we're going to take a motherboard screw, which is this one. There are technical names for these screws, certain sizes and stuff like that, but they're not really labeled. So that's why I don't mention them. Somebody else mentioned, like, oh, you should mention the size screws. You're not going to be able to determine that by that, because you saw the bag that it came in. It was just a big plastic piece of bagging. So that's why I showed on camera. But this is a very thin type of screw compared to a screw like this, which this one is more for like a case screw, and it's a little thicker and it's a little bit bigger screw. This is the one that you're going to be using for your motherboard. It has a top like that, and this is more of a case screw to give you an idea. So I know this is a little bit looking weird, but you're just going to have to trust me on that. And if you are building a system by yourself, if you're unsure, you can always take one of these screws and try to thread, before you even put the motherboard in, you could try to thread it into the standoff. If it threads in nicely, then you know you've got the right one. If it's fighting you on threading into the screw hole, then you know obviously you should probably check to have a different one. So I usually go for the middle one over here just because it's the easiest one to reach and it makes it easy to kind of screw in. So I'm just going to do that. But you should make sure to count up and screw in all of the screws that you have standoffs for. If you miscount, if you have, let's say, you screwed in 4 screws, but you counted you had 5 standoffs, take the motherboard back out because you have missed a standoff, or a standoff is underneath the part of the board that's not supposed to be there. So you could ground your board, is really what I get down to. So that's the reason why you want to make sure you have the correct standoffs. I also recommend that if this is your first time building a machine, do not use an electric screwdriver like I am using right now. Use a regular screwdriver, not a ratcheting one or anything, just a regular standard Phillips screwdriver. I think it's a Phillips 2-bit that requires for this. And just making sure that you don't go cross-threading any screws. I've done this 20,000 times. That's the reason why I use an electric screwdriver. You don't need to. It's just a little bit more of a convenience. But you don't really need an electric one to actually build a machine. So, in fact, I recommend you just don't use one when you're building a brand new machine and you don't know what you're doing, or it's your first time. I say don't know what you're doing, but if it's your first time, you don't want to end up cross-threading a screw just because you wanted to save like 3 seconds of time. I'm going to plug in the back fan at this point, and what I'm doing is I'm taking off the little wire tie that's on here. This wire tie has a piece of metal in it, so you don't really want anything that's a metal piece lingering around in your case. This could become a problem, so just toss that out. Replace it with a regular standard wired plastic wire tie. And of course, this motherboard, the power connector for the fan is way over here, not in a normal spot. I'm just trying to see if I missed one, but I don't see one here. So this is the only other system fan that actually is in this case. It's fine. It's, you know, this doesn't have a side panel with glass, but if it did, if it had a glass side panel, I would probably find a different way of routing this, because this is going straight across the board. But in this case, I am just going to kind of tuck this up here and along down that way and hope for the best. But honestly, this should probably, I don't know if we have enough room, but we should go back behind the board and then come back over here. But I don't think this cable is going to be long enough. You know what? Let's try it. Let's try it. I don't think it's going to go, though. I don't think it's going to be long enough. What I'm doing is just passing it along to the back side of the case and then bringing it back up through the little hole here. Actually, it is long enough. All right, so let's go with that. It looks better. Then I don't have to cable manage as much. Now it's just in the way of the motherboard connector. Like usual, there is always something in the way. So we're just going to tuck that back there. So at least it looks a little better than going right across the board. You don't have to do this. This is probably overkill. Honestly, I feel like it's overkill. But you can just tuck some of these cables away so that they're a little bit nicer. There's nothing about to get caught in a fan. Really, cable management is about making sure that these cables don't get caught in fans. Because if you have your cables caught in the fan, you could, the fan could actually cut down the cable, or stop working and then not spin anymore, or even worse, it may even cut one of these cables and you'll have to replace the fan because you really can't, well, you could solder another cable on, but that would be just crazy. It would take more time than just buying the fan. Plus it's safer. All right, at this point we're ready for the power supply, and we're gonna take the power supply, put it in, and then we're gonna put all these lovely cables here through the holes that are supposed to go, and connect everything up. So I'm just taking a look at where everything is connecting to. JP1, JFP1. Okay, so the front panel one is right here, and oh, you guys cannot see this. I don't think this is even going to be visible. Yeah, it's way too small, but there's actually a pinout diagram for the front panel connector, and that is right here on the motherboard. It's very small. If you're not close to it, you will not be able to read it. It is kind of the standard same pinout for every motherboard, so if you're not sure, you can also just check the manual. The manual will definitely have a bigger picture of it, but that is the connector up front. Then we got USB over here. Where's USB? Ah, it says USB right in front of me. So there's your USB connector, and that's going to be your 3.0 connector, and this is going to be your audio connector down here in the corner over here. So let's get the cables run around, and we'll put the power supply in also. And let me flip it over. By the way, building upwards is a little easier. I'm just building this way because, you know, for camera purposes, but usually building with the computer upwards is a little easier than putting it down on the ground like this, like down onto the table. Putting your motherboard in, yes, but putting the power supply in, going upwards is easier. So down here, this is the bottom part of the case, opposite side. This is where your power supply is going to go. If you look a little bit to the left, there is some holes, which I don't think you can see, but there are holes here. That is for a bigger spinning rush drive if you have one. If you have SSDs, they go up here on the other side, or you can put them on this side if you want to, like, just not really want to see them. You can put them on this side or the other side. Either way, they have little grommet holes here to get the wires through and connect to the board. At this point, we do have a lot of wires going to the front panel connector, so we're just going to sort these out really quick. You got very thin wires. These thin wires are for the front panel buttons and stuff like that. This is all for your USB, your audio, and that's it. So two are for USB, one is for audio. And you're going to put them through the proper grommet holes. I'm going to put these in now before I put the power supply in, because if you put the power supply in first, you'll have a hard time reaching these grommet holes and make it a little bit more complicated. So this one we can lay off that way. These two can go off to the side up here. These are further to the back of the board. If you're not sure where these go, just obviously when you're building it straight up, you can easily look at both ends. Again, I'm just doing this for our purposes to make this easier for cameras. I don't want to keep flipping back and forth, but I already know where they go. They go on this side, and get that in there. There we go. And then the USB 3.0 is about mid-board, so we're going to put that over there. And now we're ready for the power supply. So we're going to take the power supply out of the box. It's in the box. All right. This out. Ugh. This power supply is a little dirty. The box is a little dirty. Yeah, whatever. Manual comes with it. Nothing really exciting. You can read that if you feel the need. Power cord comes with the system, so you just take the power cord. It has the screws in here for the power cord, also the screws for the back of the board for the power supply itself. So you want to take those out and put them out on the side. You're going to need these. This you keep for obviously plugging in your computer later. I'm just going to put it back into its little package. Power supply itself comes out, and we've got a lovely piece of junk on top of the plastic. There we go. Box. Goodbye. All right, so this is a Thermaltake Smart 500. This is kind of a budget series power supply. If you don't have a graphic card, this is fine. It's not overkill, it's not underkill. It's perfectly what we need for the system. If you're going to put a graphic card in your system, this is not the power supply to use, especially with the new power requirements. You will want a higher end power supply, something probably like a 600 or 700 watt power supply. What I do want to show really quickly on why this is not a good power supply for a graphic card is very simple. Turn the right side up so you guys can read it. Hopefully you can read this. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So your max output power is 100 watts there, but you have, this is the most important one. This is a 12 volt rail. The 12 volt rail has 420 watts. It's not actually a 500 watt power supply all going into that 12 volt rail. So your 12 volt rail is really where you plug in your graphic card into. So this would be only good for probably 1 or 2 generation back graphic card at the current time that we're doing this. This is not really good for anything that's new, because anything that's new will probably pull more than 420 watts. So again, just because it says 500 watt power supply does not mean you can pull 500 watts on that 12 volt rail. Some power supplies are over-spec'd for this. The more expensive power supplies, you're probably going to be seeing a lot more, wattage being able to be pulled on that side. This is the Smart series of Thermaltake. Thermaltake also makes our little higher end series, as well as a lot of other companies like Corsair, Seasonic. If you're going to go with a real graphic card, I would recommend you probably go with a different brand. Thermaltake is not bad for this, but they do underwatt their power supplies a little bit on that 12 volt rail. That's to save some money. So if you want to get a graphic card, probably Corsair is probably your best way to go, just because cost to wattage is pretty decent for that. So I don't have any model numbers of that, but if you guys are really curious about that, we have other build videos that do have a Corsair power supply in it, and you can watch those and you can understand why that is, and why that's a little bit better. All right, so I take the 4 screws out, and you're going to put you're going to put the 4 screws in the back of the case, obviously. I'm going to stand the case up, because every time I have it downwards, and it makes it really a pain in the butt for me. And it's just common sense, just put it upwards so that gravity doesn't fight me, and it'll just settle to the bottom of the case where it's supposed to be. By the way, the fan goes towards the bottom of the case, the power supply fan, because there's already a mesh filter in the bottom. So you'll be able to get that, you know, it'll be lined up with the mesh filter on the bottom, and it'll get the proper airflow. If you put it the opposite way, accidentally, it's not the end of the world. It just won't cool as efficiently. So I recommend facing it towards the bottom. Now, there's a little side note here. If you're putting this computer on carpet, which you shouldn't do anyway, if you do, you should put some space, like put it on top of like a little, you know, Apple box or something, like, you know, I say Apple box, like people know what that means. You should put it on top of some sort of box or some sort of layer like that so that it's off the ground. Because once it's off the ground, you can actually have a little bit more airflow underneath there. I, again, don't recommend putting this on the floor. I don't recommend anybody putting their computer on the floor. But, you know, I understand that we are all kind of concerned with space a little bit once in a while, and we just don't have any other option. And in that case, you just be careful not to put it on carpet or something like that. If it's on a regular tile floor, it should be fine. But if it's on carpet, you're going to want to put it on something a little more like a shelf or something that goes off the floor. You know, like a little mini kick shelf or something. I don't know what they call those, but they're like the little shelves that go on the floor so that you can bring something up off the floor. What I'm doing right now is I'm just running the cables. Everything's screwed in. So I'm just putting I'm skipping steps here. This is the CPU cable. Now, this is another problem why I don't like Thermaltake sometimes. And that's because they don't label their cables. So for a novice, this might be a problem. If you are a novice, do not get a Thermaltake power supply. Just buy a Corsair or buy an EVGA one that actually has labels on it. But to tell the difference here, this is an 8-pin for the CPU. I don't think even the one for the graphic card is not labeled. You see, like, this is very similar. This could be very confusing if you look at this. So this is obviously one for your graphic card. It has two little things off of it. Again, I wouldn't use this anyway because you really shouldn't probably use, unless you have a really inexpensive graphic card or like a lower end, lower power consumption graphic card, you could probably use it. But anything new, I would not use this power supply anyway. So just tuck that down there. And this is the one you're using for the CPU. It has 8 pins. It is already connected together. You're going to put it into the top slot over here because that's the top part of the motherboard. That's where it's going. So you just push it through there. Yeah, just give it as much on that side as possible. This is your motherboard one, which is going to be your 24 pin. That is going to go into this center socket area because that's where it is on the opposite side of the board. It's over here somewhere. This is on top of the board, so that's where I'm pushing it up there. Everything else, now this board has a non-modular power supply, so everything is plugged into it. These are for all your peripherals. You got your SATA connection, you got your Molex connectors, which are really old, and you got even a floppy drive connector. Who has a floppy drive anymore? Probably more for tape drives. Tape drives also share that same stupid connector. So these things, you could just bundle up and throw them down at the bottom of the case, okay? So that's where it's going to go right now. I'm just going to throw them down there for now, which we should tie it up though. So let's get all the cables pushed through. Hopefully they stay kind of. And let's flip it back over and plug everything in. All right. Okay, so a lot of cables all over the place. What we're going to do here is focus. Okay. So, first, I'm going to connect the big connection so it's out of the way. This is the motherboard connector. If you notice, there's a clip on this side, and there is a sliding piece here that can actually come apart. We're going to keep it on there because we're going to use all of it, but some motherboards don't require these last 4 pins. But in this case, this board does. Most boards usually do. You got to make sure that this clip aligns with that clip on this side, and you're going to click it into place. That is a lot of C's for one day. So let's put this in. Hopefully I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Okay, should slide right in. You should hear it click. Once you hear the clip click, then you're all good to go. So that's in there. Now you're going to also do the top one. This one goes up to the top part of the motherboard right here. That is your 8-pin for your CPU. And you're going to double check where clip side is. This is the black motherboard. Of course, all black motherboards are a pain in the butt to see. So I just feel out for which way it goes, and then you just push it in. Now, if you push it in and it's not going, don't keep pushing, because you obviously have got it the wrong direction. So just double check to make sure you got it the right direction, and then re-push in. It should just slide in. These are keyed, so you can't put them in the wrong way, but you can force them in the wrong way. So just be careful. You shouldn't have to force these. These should just slide straight in. Now, we got USB 3.0. This is the wire for this connector right here. So we're just going to plug that straight in. Be careful. This one has very small pins. You couldn't make a problem with misalignment, but it does have a key. It has like a little plastic nub there, which should line up with the plastic nub on the board. Should just pop in, and you're all set for that. Now, down here is the tricky part. This is all the front panel connectors. They are labeled, and they are labeled with positive and negative on the ones that are important. The only ones that are going to have positive and negative are going to be your LED lights. So those are going to be the ones that are like your hard drive light, your power light. Anything like switches, like your reset switch and your power switch, are not going to have positive and negative. It doesn't matter which way you plug them in, so it should be no issue. Now they're going to plug into your JFP1 on this motherboard, which is the front panel connector. If you're not sure which one that is, it will be in the manual. I am looking at the board to find out which one goes where. But again, you can look this up in the manual if you can't read it off the board. It also gives you the plus and negative, which side each plug should be plugged into. Reset is next, and the reset doesn't matter. If anything doesn't work, like if your button doesn't work, which would be really weird, check where you have it plugged in. You probably have it plugged into the wrong spot. Just, you know, unplug it, replug it back in. It's not going to hurt anything if you plug it into the wrong one here. It'll just be a lot easier if you plug it in right the first time, because then you won't have to keep opening this up. Now this is a very small area. If you have a graphic card here, this will also cover this area, which will make it very difficult to reach. So you'll want to do this before you put your graphic card in, if you do have a graphic card. HD audio, we're just going to plug that in over here. It's labeled it's labeled JAUD1 if you really care for that on the motherboard, and the USB is labeled JUSB1, and they are keyed. So what I'm looking at here is that they are keyed out, and I'm going the wrong way. And they have a little knockout there. That knockout pin should match to the one that basically is knocked out on the board, and that will be down here at the bottom. I'm just gonna make sure I got it the right way, and plug it in. Should go nicely. If you're pushing too hard, you're gonna bend a pin, so don't do that. If this is your first time, just double check. It should slide right in. You shouldn't have to give it too much force. And if it doesn't slide just right in, just stop, because you're gonna end up bending a pin. And bending a pin means that you're gonna spend more time unbending it. So now, if you noticed, all these cables are a little hung out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this around the opposite side. We're going to actually tie everything down now. If you have a SATA drive, SATA drive, like an SSD or a spinning Rust drive, then you would be plugging those SATA connectors on this side. They are front facing, so you can plug them in straight to the front part of the case, and that will connect. That's where you plug them in. Now there's an option for 4, but right now we have no drives to put in, so we're not going to use that. But if you do have another drive, you can plug it in there. Doesn't matter which one you plug it into. You could plug it into the number 0 first if you want, or you can plug it into number 4. It really doesn't matter, or 3, whatever it is. It really doesn't matter because the BIOS will determine, boot order anyway, so it really doesn't make a difference. I always recommend plugging it to 0, but just to start. But you don't, that's just keeping things sane, but that doesn't really matter too much. All right, let's do some cable management because this is really annoying me. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull this cable back as far as we can without breaking anything. And what you're gonna do is we're going to tie these down to the little anchor points here. So we got an anchor point here, anchor point there, there, there. So just tie everything down. Now with your cable ties, you might want to bend the tip a little bit and the little tail, and put the tail through so it slides up and then pull forward. If you don't bend the tail on these, it will still go through, but you'll have a lot harder time. If you bend the tail, it'll be a little easier to get it in place. So, all right, just push that down nice and tight. And same thing here, you want to do the tail, bend the tail a little bit, just so it props up, push through, and zip down. All right. So keep going. You're just basically going to keep following the same thing. You're just going to keep going all the way down. You want to make sure your cables are nice and, pushed back this way. You don't want them hanging out the other side. Now, again, this is just totally for cosmetic reasons. At this point, there's really no reason, we've already avoided the fans. We've already avoided a lot of other issues. So this is really just for us to make sure that it stays, nice and neat. But when our technicians come to clean computers, it makes it a little easier if everything's already tied up. Because if everything's already tied up, we don't have to worry about a whole bunch of wires getting our way when we go to clean out the dust. And there will be dust. So it's just better off that we have everything nice and neat, and it's it's a lot easier to get our technician can get in there in 10 seconds and blow out a system instead of spending 15 minutes playing with cables and getting things out of the way. Usually what they'll do is if they see a lot of loose cables, they will go back and then retie them down anyway, because that means someone was in the case and it needs to be rechecked. You're going to take all those little tails, cut them off. And now what you're going to do, the same thing on this side. You're going to have some tie downs. You're going to tie all these cables down straight off to the side. I like these cables to be kind of tied over here. Tied over here. There's only one tie down over here, but it does keep everything kind of out of the way. This one's a little weird, but that one's going to get tied over there. Just go to the one that's kind of closest. I don't like to go down this route with a lot of cables, because if you want to do a hard drive in the next future or whatever, you're going to have a lot more of a difficult time putting it in when there's a lot of extra cables in your way. So this will basically eliminate that problem and future-proof a little bit here and there. You don't have to go this again. You don't have to go this crazy. Just keep them out of the way of the fans is really the most important thing. Everything else really is just for cosmetic reasons. So we're just going to slide this. This one's a little rough. Thick cable here. All right. So we're just going to tie that down. If you're not sure, just get the tie in the right position at least, and then pull. So at least this way, you can always slide the cable through the loop a little bit more. This is a weird cable today. I don't know what's with this. Why are we fighting me? All right, so you know what? Most of the other motherboards have this, the USB 3.0 now at the other bottom piece. So it's a little weird that MSI put it over there, but it is what it is. Slide this through. Same thing, just loop all the cables, pull. If you also noticed, I'm keeping them a little bit loose. I'm not going crazy. I'm not pinching this part of I'm not pinching this part of the cable too much. I'm pinching more up here. You don't want to bend it all at a 90-degree angle. You might end up snapping a cable, which would be really bad. So just try to keep it a little bit flexible. Cut, tails, do not cut your cable. And okay, so there's a little bit of stuff at the bottom, which you're not seeing on camera here, is this rat's nest of garbage. So we're gonna take all this stuff out here, pull this back out, reorganize a little bit. Now, this is, again, this is our customer, so we're gonna spend the extra few seconds and do this. But if this is your own build, you could just throw those cables at the bottom and not even give a crap. Because honestly, you're not gonna move the machine around very much. You're not gonna probably hear the little sounds it's gonna make. But you know, when we go to bring a computer to a customer, we really don't want to hear the little rattling noises. So we want to make sure everything is nicely tied down. So we're just gonna tie these up. I'm just putting them in a big bundle. Tie them up on one end, tie them up on the other end. Now this is also when my technicians, I would say my technicians, my other fellow technicians get really angry at me because I like to put a lot of ties on here. I put a lot of ties on here so it doesn't move. But I understand when they want to work on something, now they're going to cut 2 ties instead of 1. I think we're being very nitpicky. Honestly, I think more ties is better because at least this way nothing moves and nothing gets stuck or gets in the way of things that are not supposed to be in the way. And then you could just cut this cable way back there. These are not like it. I'm just going to tie these up. And one more tie where, of course, I am more out of my package. All right, just tie them up. One more tie. Okay, I'm gonna do one more tie. Yeah, one more tie. That's what Brian says, always one more tie. It's like one more push up. All right. All right, there we go. And I'm happy, okay? So now, obviously, we have extra screws that the customer still needs. So they're gonna need these. You're gonna need these just in case. We don't hand these off to the customer. We will keep them in the case. We have handed the customer before and then they lose them and then we don't have them when we need to put in a hard drive or something like that. So I'm just making a little hole and I'm going to use a cable tie and tie them to the bottom part of the case so they're out of the way. They won't be in anybody's way. Nobody will even know they're there except us. Well, and our customer now because they're obviously watching this video, I hope. Anyway, so tie that in. So it's a nice big tie and I'm going to just put this through the bottom 2 holes on the bottom part of the case, which is not this side. That side. Come on. There we go. Okay. And if they want to add a hard drive at the later time, this will help because this basically means that there's already screws down there. We don't have to go hunting for more screws. This is the right ones for this case. Every case has its own set of screws, and if you lose these screws, it becomes a problem. It'll delay installing the new hard drive until you get screws from the manufacturer, which may take a very long time. Now, we have extra screws at our location, which we always, we always buy them, but then again, the case models change over time, and sometimes those screws change. So therefore, it may not be the best solution to use something that's not directly made for that case. I'm just tying down one more cable at the top. That's the case fans cable that's in the back. It's not really necessary to probably do this, but it will keep the wire from going all over the place. All right, let's cut that. And we're done with the back. So now we're about to flip back over, and now we're probably ready to boot at this point. Let me switch back to 1. All right, so Oh yeah, let's get this thing on my face. This is annoying. Okay. So, we're ready to boot. And what we're going to do is we're going to plug it in. We're going to do a quick load of Windows. We'll do a BIOS update. And then that's basically it, because I really can't show you guys more than past the Windows load, because obviously we get into customization for the customer itself, and that's not really what we do. So we're gonna grab a keyboard and mouse, which this time I actually have the keyboard and mouse over here for once. Still not tied up the right way, but it's here. All right. Yeah, keyboard, mouse. Just plug it in. When you plug into your back of your motherboard, you'll see different colored USB ports. Somebody actually asked me what's the difference between the USB colors, and I really can't say that this is the standard for the colors, but usually black is USB 2.0, blue is USB 3 of some type, could be 3, 3.1, 3.1 Gen 1, Gen 2, depends on the motherboard and stuff like that. They also have red ports. The red ports are usually the fastest of the ports, and those are usually like your USB 3.1 Gen 2x2 or whatever it is. Again, it depends on the board. If you're really concerned with speed or whatever you're plugging into, you know, if you have red ports, plug it into the red ports if you're really concerned with speed. But don't go plugging your keyboard and mouse into a red port, because that's going to be extremely quick for something that you don't need to be that quick. You can actually plug your keyboard and mouse into the black ports, which are your USB 2.0 ports. Usually you'll have more of those ports. Now again, it's not standard, so what I'm saying may or may not be applicable to that board. If you have a motherboard manual, reference the motherboard manual, and you should have a quick answer on what's going on. All right, so we're ready to turn on. Everything's plugged in, power is plugged in, video's plugged in. Hopefully everything boots up. So let's switch over to 4. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Let's power it on. So far, nothing blowing up, which is a good idea. On this board, there are LED lights that tell you kind of like what's going on. You can reference those if you have an issue. Now, the system did boot. It does say CPU or memory change. Please enter setup to configure your system. Yes, you must enter setup because this is the first time you're running anything. So hit F1. That's what I'm doing. It will sometimes reboot like it just did. It probably has to retrain the memory. This is normal. Just let it do its thing. The first time booting, you are going to have funky things going on. This is just the way it works. It has to determine your motherboard, not your motherboard, I'm sorry. It has to determine your processor that you currently have plugged in and the RAM and stuff like that. If you've noticed, now we're in the BIOS screen. The BIOS screen shows up here your motherboard itself, the CPU that's installed, the memory that's installed, and your BIOS version. In this case, the BIOS version is a little old. I do have the new BIOS version on this flash drive, which I am going to plug in. I am plugging that into a USB 3.0 slot, but it doesn't matter. It just might go a little faster. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to mFlash to flash the BIOS. By the way, if you don't know how to get all this stuff, you can just download it right from the manufacturer. So MSI has them on the website. You'll go to your motherboard, make sure you're on your correct motherboard, and download the BIOS. The BIOS, before you flash anything, you should be on some sort of UPS battery. What you don't see here is that I do have a UPS battery back here that is keeping all of this on. So, including this system. This system is plugged into that battery. So just in case, if there's a power outage, we don't end up bricking the motherboard. So let's click on mFlash. It's going to say, do you want to go into flash mode? I don't know why that's like a stupid question. No, I clicked it and I didn't want to go in there. Anyway, all right, so it's going to reboot. It's going to go into flash mode. At that point, it's going to read up that USB flash drive, and it's going to say, hey, I got a flash I got a new BIOS. Do you want to load it? So let's see if it comes up. Okay, so that's my flash drive, and I put the file right on the main part of the flash drive. This file here. This happens to match with the one that is this motherboard, and says, do you want to select this file? Are you sure you want to select this file? Yes, and then it's going to go into BIOS updating. So during this BIOS update, if you notice, there's a big symbol that says, do not turn off, do not unplug the USB flash drive. Just follow the directions. Don't do any of those things. So just wait, sit around for a few minutes. It will show you the temperatures of the CPU. By the way, you should have probably checked the temperature of the CPU to make sure you're not having thermal runaway. You don't want to, you don't want to do this during when you have a bad CPU fan or something. But I did check it really quickly. I just look at it. I didn't really mention it, but that CPU is at perfect temperature. 33 degrees Celsius is fine. That is operational temperature for this processor. The CPU fan is at a decent speed of 604 RPM, which is fine for stock cooling. We're upgrading our BIOS from version 1.10 to 1.91, which is now, that BIOS is the newest. It is at 10/6/2022, so that is last month. Try to make sure you get the most current one, because there are a lot of bug fixes and patches and stuff like that. When should you update your BIOS? You should probably update your BIOS every time you go to do your system cleanout, which should be about every year at least. Once a year, you should just take a look at it, see if there's a new BIOS that fixes problems. If your system's running perfectly fine, there's not really a reason to update the BIOS if you don't know what you're doing for updating the BIOS. But if you're very comfortable with updating the BIOS, then you could just upgrade it once a year. Just check to see if there's a new version, because they do fix a lot of stuff, and they do have performance enhancement, features and stuff like that. After you do update your BIOS, though, double check to make sure your settings are all correct before you go to boot your operating system. So go back into the BIOS, make sure your XMP memory is set, make sure you also have the proper boot drive set, and if you have an overclock set, make sure all your overclock settings are correct. It will erase probably your overclock settings and most of those other settings before you do this. So if you are overclocking, yeah, you might want to back those up. Write them down or back them up. And this is the boring process of waiting. After we're built, and we're now going to do a reboot. Once it reboots, you want to go back into the BIOS. To get into the BIOS on this board, it's the delete key. Most boards are delete. If you're on like a Dell or something like that, it might be F10 or F12. Okay. You're going to get a lot of black screens. Don't worry. This is part of the process. It does take a few times to reboot to get into the BIOS. So this wait time is normal. Now, if you have an AMD system like a Ryzen or a newer Ryzen, that boot time is even longer. So you may have to wait a little longer. Now, this new BIOS, obviously it says select cooler. In this case, we have a box cooler, which is the one that came with the processor. We're just gonna select that. Now it comes into now what you want to check is in here, you want to check to make sure your BIOS updated, which it did. It says BIOS date 10/6/2022. You want to check your core temperature. Motherboard temperature is fine. Voltage is fine. What you want to do is from here you could kind of go into this is the easy menu. I hate the easy menu. It's not easy for me. I like to go to the advanced one, so I'm going to hit F7 and go to the advanced one. I'm going to go to settings. I'm just going to make sure everything kind of looks right. The date is wrong. It is 05/2022. Time is, that's not right either. 16:34. Why do I have a hard time adding 12 today? Oh my God, it must be the weekend. All right, that's all you get to set in there for the time. I usually look for the memory. I think it's Might be under overclocking. I also go to Super I/O. I turn off the serial port. If you're not using it, turn it off. It's just another thing that doesn't need to be on. You make sure you're on UEFI for your BIOS type. Secure erase, you don't have to worry about that. You don't need to do it. If you want, you can run a self-test on the hard drive, which is that's the NVMe SSD self-test. I'm not going to run this because that takes way too long, and we don't have a long enough stream for that. So, all right, let's MSI driver utility installer. If you have a Gigabyte board, it says Gigabyte driver utility installer. Turn this junk off. This is the most annoying thing. It boots up when you boot into Windows. It's a new feature in most of the new BIOSes that pop up an installation for your drivers. It's really stupid and it doesn't work right. It's just kind of new, and yeah, not the best solution. Go over to overclocking. Let's just check everything. Just put normal. We're not overclocking here. We're just going to check the XMP profile. We're going to enable that. It should pick up your RAM correctly. That's what's below this right here. It is DDR4 3200. That is the correct latency and all the timings. If your timings are incorrect, you might need to adjust, your clock settings, or you could just turn it off if you really don't want to mess with it. The XMP profile does add a little bit of speed for your memory, so it is worth it if you can do it. Now, there's a boot order, so I'm just going to change the boot order. Right now, this has got a lot of boot options. Really, the first option I really want is my Samsung flash drive. Everything else I'm just going to disable for now. You don't have to disable all this. You could just put the first one first if you know what you're doing there. You can do that. I like to disable all the other ones so I know that I'm booting off that drive. It is probably overkill. All right, so that's ready to go. Fast boot is on, yeah. MSI fast boot skips like memory tests and stuff like that. If you want, you could turn that on when you got your system up and running. Post beep is that little speaker thing, what we were talking about before. You can turn that on if you want. I find it aggravating, so we leave it off. Save settings and exit. And you just go to save changes and reboot. By the way, I'm just using the up and down arrow keys. I mean, you could use the mouse if you want. I just am so used to not having a mouse for this stuff. So a little old fashioned, but you could also use the mouse and click through things if you want. Now we're on a reboot. I already loaded Windows 10 on that flash drive, so it should boot right into Windows 10. I'm going to have another video on how to load Windows 10 and Windows 11, so that's coming very shortly. But I'm going to go through it really quickly here. We're going to choose English because that's where we are. We have United States, that's where we are also, so next. During this installation, I do not have myself connected to the internet, and there is a reason why. I don't want to set up the Microsoft profile, so that's why I'm doing it this way. If you want to avoid the Microsoft profile and you don't want to have the Microsoft profile and you just want to have a Windows profile, just leave yourself disconnected from the internet, including Wi-Fi. Now it's going to ask you for a product key. I have a product key for the customer, but obviously we're on stream and I can't enter that. So I'm just going to say I don't have a product key for right now. And then I'm just going to choose the installation I want, which is Windows 10 Pro. And we're going to accept the license agreement because we have no other choice. We're going to choose a custom installation, but you could choose the other option if you want. Since this drive is empty, it really doesn't matter. But we're going to select the main drive, which just make sure the drive size is correct, which it is. And we're going to hit next. We're only doing one partition here. If you have multiple partitions, that's the section where you're going to say, okay, I got to now set up multiple partitions. I don't recommend doing multiple partitions while you are going through the installation. Just get the system set up. You can do the multiple partitions later. You could also, if you're going to use only one drive and split it up a little bit, then you're going to have to do it there and there's no other choice. But if you're going to use multiple drives and have multiple partitions, just have your primary drive set up first, then hook up your secondary drive and then set it up in Device Manager or disk management. Probably disk management, not device management. Okay, this is the really boring part. We're just basically waiting for it to install. It shouldn't take too long. I also loaded all the drivers onto this flash drive. So everything is pretty much in one drive. But you don't have to do that. You can also just use multiple USB drives, or you can just connect to the internet when you're ready and just download everything right to this machine. Either one. I just prepared the drive because it's just easier for me. This is a normal boot screen, and it went back into the Windows setup. So I have to go back into the BIOS, so just hit yes to exit. It didn't switch the BIOS back to the boot manager. This happens. If this does happen, just go back to the BIOS and select the proper hard drive for booting. Some BIOSes are automatic and will do it right. This one happened to not do it right. So just go back to your boot menu, and then you just change the boot order to the main drive that's connected. This one is, it says Windows Boot Manager. Usually it'll say like UEFI, hard disk drive, Windows Boot Manager. That's what it's going to say. That's the model number of the drive that's installed. So that's the SSD that's installed, NVMe that's installed. Save, reboot. And it should boot right to the main drive at this point. Yeah, it takes a second. This is not the really exciting part of installation. Most people skip this and don't bother recording it, but it is one of the most important parts because it's how you get your operating system running. So without it, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. So. All right. And we're almost there. Again, it may reboot a few times. This is normal. The normal setup process does reboot a few times, so just be patient. Okay, here we go. Just a moment. It's going to come up with this stupid booting screen. All right, it's going to ask you what region you're in. You just choose the one that you want, which in this case is the United States. What type of keyboard? Move on. You're going to ask if you want a second keyboard. In this case, we don't. Now it's going to say, let's connect to the network. In this case, I'm just going to say I don't have a network. And we're just going to continue with limited setup. It's going to try to tell you, oh, you know, you get all these stupid beneficial features of it tracking you and all that other garbage. So just say no. Now you're going to put in the user. I'm just going to put user for now, but you should probably put your name. Password, you should probably put a password. I'm going to leave it empty just for simplicity purposes. I turn all this junk off, which is just all their tracking and garbage that we don't need. Then we accept. I'm not going to install Cortana because they don't have a microphone anyway. Again, all those features that we just went through right there, you can always turn those back on if you really want them on at a later time. All right. This may take several minutes. If it's Microsoft, it'll definitely take us several minutes. Okay. Almost there. Oh, this is really slow. Getting there. There we go. All right, so default setup here. We're just going to say maybe later for that. We're not doing anything with the internet yet. What we're going to do is we're going to download my drivers that I have off the USB flash disk, which I made a folder called drivers. I'm going to paste them to the desktop. All right. So in the drivers folder, we have all of the drivers. I'm going to load the drivers first, then I'm going to remove all the junk bloatware because there's a bunch that doesn't need to be on there. So I'm just going to extract all of these right to the same folder. You just right click it, choose extract, and then double click the setup file. Sometimes it's in a folder, sometimes it's not in a folder. It depends on your motherboard, so this is going to be a little bit weird. When you're installing the chip, all the drivers, just basically next. It should install everything that you want. Now, if you're doing this on your own, you should restart. For right now, for our purposes, I'm not going to restart, just because for time purposes, we're going to go quick. But if this is your first time doing this and you don't know that you can or cannot reboot, I would recommend rebooting at that time then. Install, finish. Okay, that was an easy one. VGA, same thing, extract. You just go one at a time. Some of these drivers are a little larger, some of them are a little smaller. May take a little longer. I'm going to unplug the USB flash drive because we don't need it at this point. Install. Just remember where you left off, because obviously you need to know where you are before you go to the next one. This is just the graphic card driver from Intel. Close that. Realtek, and extract while we're waiting. Try to do one drive at a time, and then, you know, you should really reboot if it says reboot, but again, I know we don't have to, but if you're doing, again, if you're doing this for the first time, you should probably reboot, let it do its installation, and then move on to the next one. That's going to be okay. Optional reboot, yeah, we'll just hit finish on that. Realtek, this is just the sound card, I think. Yeah, sound drivers. Okay. All right, this is the last driver, so I'm just going to hit finish on that. We're going to close this, close that, and we're going to do a quick reboot so we have the most current drivers before we remove all the bloatware. There's a lot of bloatware that Microsoft loads on each system, so I made a script that just basically erases all that junk. If it's a fresh machine, you can leave it the way it is. If you guys want to download that, you can download it. It's on one of our other live streams about Windows 10 bloatware. It is available. It is free. It doesn't cost anything. It is a PowerShell script. It is open source, so you can modify the script if you want to. You can use it somewhere. I don't really care where you use it, just as long as you know that it's going to remove stuff. Oh, PowerShell. So I want PowerShell, so you're just going to open up PowerShell and run it as an administrator because it requires administration privileges to remove programs. And we're just going to change that folder path. You can put it in a shorter folder path so you don't have to type all this. So I'm just going to type out the directions so I don't have to remember them. I just have to run this. You're going to approve. And then what you're going to do is you're going to do ampersand and then remove bloatware. And that's going to run it. It's going to look a little funny. That's okay. It's just going to remove all the junk. It's removing like all the advertising garbage. You might get an error or two. That's okay. Some things just don't exist. It'll also turn off the telemetry. And it'll tell you that you need to reboot your computer to turn off the rest of the telemetry. But If you go to apps and features, you'll notice this is a lot shorter now, and it removed all the things like Xbox and all the other crap that gets installed and all the little utilities. So it removes all that junk. It'll also remove any Office installations, like Microsoft Office installations that come free with Windows. It's not really actually free. It's like a trial period one. It removes the trial period ones. But if you have a full licensed version of Office, it may do that as well. It may remove that. So just a little warning. But you can always edit this bloatware, you know, remove bloatware at any time. You can hit edit and it'll load up the PowerShell ISE, and you can remove anything you don't want. So you just comment out anything you just, you know, you want to keep. So if you want Office, you can comment out all the ones that say Office, which is right here. So you would just comment out like Office Hub and stuff like that if you want to keep those. But most people don't want the one that's trial. You want to buy the one, you know, full version, because the trial one is tricky. It doesn't really say it's a trial until you find out later, a month later, when it doesn't work. All right, so all the drivers are loaded. Now we should be able to go to Device Manager and just double check in here and make sure everything is loaded. I missed a driver somewhere, obviously. So, you know, you have to go back to your motherboard manufacturer and get the right one. I have to probably just uninstall these. Maybe let it go, re-find it. If it doesn't find it, then you can connect to the internet, which it didn't find it, of course. You'll connect to the internet. I'm not going to connect to the internet because I got to do a whole bunch of licensing issues here with, because right now it's not activated and I have to put the product key in. So, but that's about it, guys. This is a full install of Windows, full drivers, everything's installed, pretty much ready to go. The internet, obviously, it comes with Edge. You would open that up, and you can always load Chrome or Firefox, whatever you prefer. I prefer Firefox, but you know, to each their own if they want. Just I wouldn't use Edge. It's horrible. So that's about it, guys. This is a full system build. Everything's all complete for right now. We have a bunch of videos coming out next week for hardware changes and stuff like that. So, you know, you may want to stay subscribed for that if you want to know about the newest hardware that's coming out. This is 12th gen Intel, by the way. We do have another video on 13th gen, which did come out. We are not selling 13th gen right now just because the 12th gen is more than enough for what most of our customers need, and it's still within the same socket range, so there's no reason to sell the 13th gen unless there's somebody that wants just a higher end system. AMD, same thing. We're still on AMD Ryzen 5000 series. We haven't switched over to the 7000 series yet due to cost of motherboards. The motherboards are a little high, but if a customer wants AMD and they want to go the newest processor, they can, but they will be paying a little bit of a premium for that. DDR5 is working for AMD, at least on the AMD side. So, but there's a lot of little things that are coming out next week that we will have a video on. We'll have the video on AMD, the new graphic card, the RDNA 3 graphic cards that are coming out in December. And we'll also have the pricing for that available in that video. And a little breakdown of like what's different from that in NVIDIA. It might be a good watch if you're looking for a graphic card right now. It is worth looking at. That video should be coming out Monday. And that's about it. So I'm going to sign off, but like the video and hopefully subscribe so you can stay tuned to newer stuff that's coming out. And we'll see you then. Have a great day.